Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. Do you believe I can change everything, even you? The question hung in the air between us, sharp and glittering, like a shard of glass. It was the first thing she'd said to me after I stepped into her apartment, and it wasn't at all what I'd expected. For a year, I had known Emma only through a screen. She was my closest friend, a voice of reason and encouragement in the chaotic static of my life. I was Luke, a 22-year-old amateur photographer still haunted by the ghost of a heavier, less confident version of myself. I'd lost the weight, but the insecurity clung to me like a damp coat. Online games were my refuge, and in that digital world, I'd found her, Emma, mysterious, whip-smart, and the one person who seemed to believe I could be more than what I was. After a year of late-night chats and shared victories, we decided it was time to meet. My hands were sweating as I stood outside her door, my camera bag slung over my shoulder like a nervous tick. I'm not sure what I was expecting, but it wasn't this. Her apartment was aggressively minimalist, a sterile white space filled with the low, ambient hum of high-end technology. It felt less like a home and more like a laboratory. And Emma, she was both exactly as I'd imagined and nothing like her at all, online. Her wit was a warm, inviting fire. In person, it was a cool, precise laser. She was undeniably attractive, with an intensity in her dark eyes that felt like it could strip away your secrets. There was a distance to her, a professional chill that made the easy familiarity of our online friendship feel like a distant dream. Hi, I managed, my voice sounding thick and clumsy in the pristine silence of her apartment. It's really good to finally meet you, Emma. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. You too. Luke, please, come in, make yourself comfortable. That was an impossible request. The sofa was a severe block of white leather that looked like it would disapprove of being sat on. I remained standing, shifting my weight from one foot to the other. So I started, trying to fill the silence. This is where the magic happens. She followed my gaze to the array of monitors and servers lining one wall. Something like that. She walked over to a sleek, metallic counter and poured 2 glasses of water. Her movements efficient and deliberate. She handed one to me, her fingers cool against mine. That was when she asked the question, "Do you believe I can change everything, even you?" I laughed, a nervous, reflexive sound. Is that a line from one of our games because it sounds like something a final boss would say? Her expression didn't change. I'm perfectly serious. My smile faltered. The look in her eyes was unnerving. It wasn't a challenge. It was a statement of fact. Okay, what kind of change are we talking about? Like, changing my brand of coffee because I'm pretty loyal to my current one. I'm talking about fundamental change, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper. She pulled a phone from her pocket, a device so thin and seamless it looked like a piece of polished obsidian. She tapped the screen, and a holographic interface bloomed in the air above it, a complex web of sliders and glowing data points. My photographer's brain reeled. The light was impossible. I've been developing an application, she explained, her tone casual, as if she were talking about a new recipe. I call it change. It uses biological nanobots to rewrite physical matter at a cellular level. I stared at her, then at the glowing display. Nanobots. The word sounded like pure science fiction, something from the games we played. I figured this was some kind of elaborate joke, a high-tech prank to welcome me to her world. Right, nanobots. So you're saying you can what? Make my hair bluer? Among other things, she said, her eyes flickered down to the interface. She found a slider labeled height and dragged her thumb across it. The current reading was 1.7 meters her height, about 5'7". She slid it down to 1.55. I watched, expecting a glitch in the hologram, a flicker in the lights. What happened instead was that Emma shrank. There was no sound, no flash of light. It was a smooth, seamless contraction, like watching a video being resized in real time. One moment, she was looking me almost in the eye. The next, her head was barely level with my chest. My jaw went slack. The glass of water slipped from my fingers and shattered on the polished concrete floor. The sound was deafening in the quiet room. I stammered, my heart hammering against my ribs. I'm seeing things. That's not possible. I looked around, searching for a hidden projector, a mirror, any trick of the light that could explain what I had just witnessed. There was nothing. She was simply shorter. She looked up at me, a genuine warm smile finally breaking through her cool exterior. It was the smile I knew from our video calls. "It's not impossible, Luke," she said, her voice the same, yet emanating from a smaller frame. "It's just not authorized yet." The awkwardness between us evaporated, replaced by a thrumming current of awe and disbelief. My mind, which had been racing with social anxiety, was now consumed by a single, overwhelming thought: this was real. How? Years of work, questionable funding, and a complete disregard for what's considered possible, she said. Stepping around the broken glass, she tapped her phone again, and the slider returned to its original position. I watched, mesmerized, as she grew back to her original height. The process was just as smooth, just as silent, just as utterly impossible. The air shifted. What had started as a tentative meeting between online friends was now something else entirely. It was a secret, a revelation. She had just shown me the biggest secret in the world. "Why show me this?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Because for a year, you've shown me who you are. Luke, you're an observer, an artist. You see things other people miss," she said, gesturing to my camera bag. "I need someone to document this, someone to see it, before and after." A thrill, sharp and potent, shot through me. This was more than photography. This was history. This was the beginning of everything. She saw the look on my face, the photographer's hunger, and her smile widened. "Let's get you some pictures," she said. "We have a lot to talk about." That evening, Emma took me to a high-end Italian restaurant downtown, the kind of place with cloth napkins and waiters who refilled your water glass after every sip. It was a world away from the takeout and frozen dinners that fueled my life. I felt clumsy and out of place in my simple jeans and button-down shirt, especially next to Emma, who wore a sleek black dress that seemed to both absorb and reflect the soft candlelight. As we were seated, she placed a tablet on the table between us. Its screen glowed with the same intricate interface I had seen earlier, the Change app. "A more hands-on demonstration," she said, pushing it toward me. "Go on, don't be shy." My hand trembled slightly as I reached for it. The interface was surprisingly intuitive. There were dozens of parameters for a human body, categorized and subcategorized with scientific precision. Skin tone, muscle density, metabolic rate, it was all there. I navigated to a section labeled Aesthetics. "Try something simple," she suggested, taking a sip of wine. "Hair color." I found the slider, which currently read brunette, natural deep brown. I dragged it across the spectrum with every fractional movement of my finger. Her hair shifted in color, from brown to a fiery auburn, then to a startling platinum blonde, and finally to a deep, inky black that made her pale skin seem almost luminous. It wasn't like dye. The color was part of the hair itself, rich and perfect. I settled on the blonde, just to see it linger. "Remarkable," I breathed. "It's just data. Luke, the nanobots in my system are simply executing a new command," she said, tucking a strand of unnaturally blonde hair behind her ear. We spent the next hour like that. I subtly altered the shape of her lips, added a faint dusting of freckles across her nose, and even changed her eye color from their natural dark brown to a piercing shade of green. It was like editing a photograph, but my subject was a living, breathing person sitting right in front of me. The feeling was intoxicating, a dizzying blend of power and creativity. Then I saw a slider I hadn't noticed before, tucked away in a submenu labeled Sociobiological Influence. It was labeled Sex Appeal. It was set to a baseline of 50 out of 100. I looked up at her, a playful smirk on my face. What does this one do? Emma's expression became more serious. That one is complicated. It adjusts the subtle pheromonal and biosignature outputs. In layman's terms, it makes people more receptive. My curiosity got the better of me. Receptive, how? "Why don't you find out?" she challenged. a glint of mischief in her green eyes. With a laugh, I nudged the slider from 50 to 65. I didn't expect to see anything. It wasn't a physical change, after all. Then the waitress arrived to take our order. She was a young woman, probably college-aged, professional and efficient. She started by addressing me, but her eyes kept flicking over to Emma as Emma began to speak, listing her order in a clear, confident voice. The waitress's composure began to crumble. A deep blush crept up her neck. She fumbled with her notepad, her gaze fixed on Emma's lips. When Emma finished, the waitress just stood there for a moment, looking flustered and breathless, before stammering, "Of course," right away. She practically fled from the table. Emma and I locked eyes, and then we both burst out laughing. It was a shared, genuine laugh that finally broke the last of the ice between us. But underneath the humor, a cold shiver ran down my spine. That wasn't just a simple change, it was a form of influence, of control. The power of this technology was terrifying. I quietly slid the setting back to 50. "Now you see," Emma said, her laughter subsiding into a more somber expression. "It's not just about changing yourself. It's about changing how the world sees Yogi." As we ate, she told me about her past. The technology, she explained, had been co-opted by a former lover, a brilliant but dangerously possessive man. He had used an earlier version of change to mold her into his ideal partner. "He didn't just change my appearance," she said, her voice low and laced with a pain that felt raw and immediate. "He changed my moods. He would dial down my ambition when he felt threatened, increase my affection when he felt insecure. I became a version of myself that existed only to please him. I lost track of who I was. When I finally got out, I made a promise to myself. I would perfect this technology, but I would use it only for liberation, never for control." Her story cast a dark shadow over the dazzling power I had just witnessed. It grounded the impossible technology in a very real, very human story of pain and survival. Later, in a moment of quiet experimentation, I was exploring the biometric data section. I saw her age listed as 27. Curious, I tapped on the number. A timeline appeared. Without thinking, I dragged the marker all the way back to 18. Across the table, Emma's face began to change. It was the most astonishing and unsettling thing I had ever seen. The subtle lines around her eyes softened and disappeared. A youthful roundness returned to her cheeks. The confidence in her expression was replaced by a wide-eyed uncertainty, the look of a teenager just stepping into the world. Then, I slowly dragged the slider forward. I watched a decade of life unfold in her face in the space of a minute. I saw the spark of ambition at 21, the shadow of heartbreak at 24, the age she must have been with him, and the hardening resolve and sharp intelligence of the woman she was now. At 27, it was like watching a soul's journey. By the time I returned the setting to the present, tears were welling in my eyes. I wasn't just looking at a technological marvel. I was looking at her, all of her. The shared secret of her past and the profound intimacy of that moment connected us in a way our year of online chats never could. I felt a deep, protective empathy for this brilliant, wounded woman. The line between fascination and genuine affection had been irrevocably blurred. When we got back to her apartment, the air was thick with unspoken energy. The clinical white space now felt charged, intimate. The revelations of the evening had transformed our relationship from a simple friendship into a complex knot of trust, vulnerability, and shared danger. Emma moved with a restless energy, her earlier composure replaced by a raw, almost feral intensity. "The nanobots are most effective when introduced directly into the bloodstream," she said, her voice a low murmur. She opened a sterile-looking metal case on the counter, revealing a single small, pearlescent pill. "This is a temporary, low-dose trial version. It allows the user's body to sync with the change interface for a few hours. It will let you feel it for yourself." My heart hammered against my ribs. Part of me was terrified, screaming that this was insane, that I should run and never look back. But a larger, more insistent part of me, the photographer, the artist, the man who had spent his life observing from the sidelines, was desperate to experience it, to be the subject, not just the witness. "Okay," I heard myself say, the word feeling both brave and incredibly foolish. "I'm in." I swallowed the pill with a glass of water. It went down smoothly, leaving no aftertaste. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, a strange warmth spread through my veins, a subtle, energetic hum that seemed to resonate at the very core of my being. It wasn't unpleasant, it felt alive. A soft feminine voice suddenly filled the room, emanating from a hidden speaker. It was calm, gentle, and unnervingly serene. "Hello, Luke, nanobot sync complete. From now on, I will be the intermediary interface for your transformation process. You may call me Haley." I jumped. "Who is that?" "Haley, my eye," Emma said, a wry smile on her lips. She retrieved a bottle of expensive-looking whiskey and 2 glasses. "She makes things easier." She poured 2 generous measures. "Now, how about a little game to celebrate our new partnership?" She held up the tablet, the change interface glowing. "Let's play a game I call Truth or Change. It's like Truth or Dare, but with higher stakes. We ask each other a question. You can either answer it with complete honesty, or you can let the other person choose a physical change for you from the app. The loser of each round makes the choice." The combination of the whiskey, the strange hum of the nanobots in my veins, and the intoxicating danger of the situation made me feel reckless. How do we determine a loser? "Rock, paper, scissors, best of 3, she said with a grin. Simple, primitive, and fair. The first round was mine. I won with a simple rock crushes scissors. "Truth or change?" Emma asked, feeling a surge of confidence. She considered it for a moment, then sighed dramatically. "Truth, fine. Get it over with." I thought for a moment, wanting to ask something meaningful. "What's the one thing you're most afraid of?" Her playful demeanor vanished, replaced by a deep, hollow look. Losing control of myself again, she answered, her voice barely a whisper, "Becoming someone else's puppet. That's why I have to be the one holding the strings now." The honesty of her answer sobered me instantly. We played another round. This time, she won. "Your turn." Luke Trop, truth or change, her eyes were alight with a fierce curiosity. The whiskey had loosened my tongue, but some things were still buried too deep. "Change," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'll take the change." A slow, wicked smile spread across her face. She took the tablet. "I've always wondered," she mused, tapping at the screen. "You're a photographer. Your eyes are your most important tool. What would it be like if they saw the world a little differently?" She adjusted a slider, and the world suddenly exploded into a kaleidoscope of enhanced color. The whites of her apartment walls seemed to glow with a blinding intensity, and the amber of the whiskey in her glass swirled with 1,000 different shades of gold and brown. It was overwhelming, beautiful, and deeply disorienting. Sensory enhancement applied, ocular spectrum expanded, Haley announced calmly. We continued to play, each round peeling back another layer of our personalities. I lost again. "Truth," I slurred, the whiskey and the visual overload making me dizzy. "Have you ever, even for a second, wondered what it would be like to be a woman?" she asked, her gaze piercing. The question hit me with the force of a physical blow. It was a secret thought I'd barely even admitted to myself. A fleeting, shameful curiosity that would occasionally surface in the lonely hours of the night. To have it spoken aloud, so directly, was both terrifying and liberating. "Yes," I confessed, the word tasting like rust and relief in my mouth. "Yeah, I have." Her expression softened with something that looked like understanding. "Me too," she said quietly. "Before all this, I used to wonder what it would be like to have the power, the freedom, that men just have." The next round I won. I chose truth for her. "Is there anything you haven't told me about this technology?" I asked. "Anything I should know?" She hesitated, her fingers tracing the rim of her glass. "Yes," she said finally. "The nanobots. They've been in your system for a while now, not at this level, but in microscopic doses. I've been seeding them into the bottled water I had delivered to your apartment for the past 6 months. It's how I helped you with the last 20 pounds of your weight loss. I accelerated your metabolism." I stared at her, my mind struggling to process the information. She had been manipulating my body, without my consent, for half a year. It was a staggering violation of trust. But as I looked at her, seeing the genuine concern in her eyes, I couldn't feel anger. All I felt was a profound sense of shock. She had cared enough to intervene, to help me in a way no one else ever could. It was controlling, yes, but it was also kind. The lines of morality were becoming hopelessly blurred. We were both drunk now, caught in a dangerous current of raw honesty and impossible science. We played one final round, best of 3. She threw paper, I threw rock. She threw scissors, I threw rock. It was down to the last throw. I chose rock again, my lucky streak. She chose paper. Her paper covered my rock. She had won. A triumphant, almost feverish look crossed her face. She stood up and took the tablet, her movements slow and deliberate. "All right, Luke," she said, her voice a low, hypnotic purr. "For your final change, I'm not just going to alter a setting. I want a real change, a reward for being so honest with me." She looked at me, her eyes filled with an unreadable mix of scientific curiosity, affection, and something that looked like artistic vision. "You said you wondered what it would be like," she whispered. "So let's find out. Let's imagine a female version of you. Let's call her Scarlett. I'd like to meet her." A cold dread washed over me, cutting through the alcoholic haze. "Emma, wait, you can't be serious." She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was looking at the screen, her fingers flying across the interface, inputting a complex series of commands. Haley's voice filled the room again, but this time it was different. It was devoid of its usual calm gentleness. It was clipped, official, and final. "Command sequence confirmed. Change X activated, initiating permanent prototype mode." "Permanent," I croaked, stumbling to my feet. "Emma, what does that mean?" But she didn't answer. The humming in my veins intensified, becoming a deafening roar. My vision, still hyper-saturated, began to blur at the edges. A wave of dizziness crashed over me, and the last thing I saw before the world went black was Emma's face, watching me with an expression of absolute, terrifying fascination. Consciousness returned not as a sudden jolt, but as a slow creeping tide of sensations. Before I opened my eyes, I was aware of the differences. The first was the weight. There was a soft, heavy weight cascading over my pillow and across my shoulders. It tickled my cheek. Hair, a lot of hair. The second was the air on my skin. It felt different, more sensitive. The simple friction of the bed sheets against my legs was a novel, almost electric sensation, and when I drew a breath, it felt shallower, my chest constricting in a way it never had before. My entire body felt lighter, more delicate, and profoundly, terrifyingly wrong. I forced my eyes open. I was in Emma's guest room, a space as minimalist and white as the rest of her apartment. Sunlight streamed through a high window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. For a moment, a foggy, hungover part of my brain tried to convince me it had all been a nightmare, a whiskey-fueled hallucination. Then I moved my hand to push the hair out of my face, and I saw it. The hand was mine. Yet it wasn't. It was smaller, the fingers more slender, the skin smoother, the nails perfectly shaped. I flexed the fingers, and they obeyed. My brain screamed in protest. A strangled sound escaped my lips, but the sound itself was alien. It was higher, softer, a gasp, not a grunt. With a surge of panic, I threw back the covers and scrambled out of bed. I was wearing a simple silk slip that clung to a body I didn't recognize. My legs were unsteady, my center of gravity completely off. I stumbled toward a full-length mirror leaning against the far wall. The person staring back at me was a stranger. She had my eyes that same shade of hazel, but they were wider, framed by long, dark lashes. Her face was softer, the jawline less pronounced, the lips fuller. Long, dark brown hair fell in waves around her shoulders. She was pretty, and she was me. The recognition was a nauseating lurch in the pit of my stomach. "No," I whispered, but the voice that came out was hers. It was a melody where a baritone should have been. "No, no, no, this can't be." This wasn't a sensory enhancement. This wasn't a change in hair color. This was a fundamental rewrite of my entire existence. Emma hadn't just changed a setting. She had changed me. At that moment, Haley's serene voice chimed in from a small speaker on the nightstand. Good morning, Scarlett. Vital signs are stable. Your neural pathways are still adjusting to the new morphology. Some disorientation is to be expected. Scarlett, I choked out, wrapping my new, unfamiliar arms around myself. My name is Luke. The designation Luke is no longer primary. Haley replied, without a hint of sympathy. Emma has assigned the new designation Scarlett. The door opened, and Emma walked in, holding a tray with coffee and a glass of juice. She was dressed in comfortable loungewear, looking calm and well-rested. She gave me a gentle, reassuring smile. I thought you might need this, she said, placing the tray on the bed. How are you feeling? How am I feeling? I shrieked, my new voice cracking with hysteria. How do you think I'm feeling? You turned me into a woman. Emma, a woman, and that robot called it permanent. Prototype mode can be reversed, she said calmly, though she didn't make it sound easy. But not immediately. The system needs to stabilize. Rushing it could cause complications. For now, you are Scarlett, and I think she's beautiful. Her words were meant to be soothing, but they only fueled my rage and fear. I wanted to scream, to break things, to rewind time to before I swallowed that cursed pill, but looking at her, at the genuine, non-scientific warmth in her eyes, my anger faltered, leaving only a deep, trembling confusion. The days that followed were a surreal crash course in being someone else. The first challenge was simply moving. My new body was a foreign country whose language I didn't speak. Emma brought me clothes, a pair of soft jeans, a simple t-shirt, and underwear. The act of putting on a bra was a mystifying and humiliating ordeal. It was constricting. The straps digging into my shoulders, the cups feeling hollow and absurd, the jeans fit snugly around hips I didn't have before, and the simple act of walking felt like I was learning to use stilts. And then came the shoes. Emma presented me with a pair of low heels, insisting it was important to learn proper posture. The first time I tried to stand in them, my ankle buckled and I would have fallen if she hadn't caught me. It's about balance, she coached, her hands on my waist, steadying me. Shift your weight, feel the ground. It's a different way of holding yourself. She was a patient, meticulous teacher. She taught me how to walk without looking like a newborn deer, how to modulate my voice so it sounded natural, how to sit, how to stand. It was a rigorous education in femininity, and every lesson felt like a betrayal of the person I used to be. I was filled with shame, with a profound sense of loss. Luke was gone, replaced by this awkward, clumsy creature. But through it all, there was a flicker of something else, a strange, unnerving curiosity. The sensation of the silk slip against my skin had been pleasant. The way my long hair felt when I brushed it was strangely soothing. I was horrified by what had happened, but a tiny, treacherous part of my mind was also intrigued. Haley became my unwilling therapist. At Emma's direction, she created what she called a cognitive mediation space, a state of light trance where my old consciousness and my new one could interact. In my mind's eye, I saw him, Luke. He was angry, terrified, a ghost trapped inside my new form. This is a nightmare. He would rage. She's erasing us. And Scarlett would try to reason with him, but we're still here. We're still thinking, we're just different. The two halves of my psyche argued, fought, and slowly, painstakingly, began to merge. Luke's fear and Scarlett's curiosity started to blend into a single, complex emotional landscape. After a week of seclusion, Emma insisted it was time to go outside. You can't hide in here forever, she said gently. You need to experience the world as Scarlett. She helped me pick out an outfit, a simple dark green A-line dress that fell to my knees, a pair of comfortable flats, a compromise after the heel incident, and a light cardigan. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I felt a strange pang. I didn't look like a man in a dress. I just looked like a woman, a nervous, uncertain woman, but a woman nonetheless. Our destination was a small coffee shop a few blocks away. Every step on the pavement felt momentous. I was hyper-aware of everything, the way the breeze felt on my bare legs, the gentle sway of the dress around me, the way people's eyes seemed to slide over me without a second glance. I was invisible in a way I'd never been as a 6-foot man. Then, as we waited in line, it happened. The man behind me cleared his throat. "Excuse me," he said. His voice was pleasant. "I don't mean to bother you. but that's a really beautiful dress. The color suits you." I froze, my entire body tensing up. My first instinct was Luke's a flash of suspicion, a defensive crouch. What does this guy want? But before I could react, another feeling surfaced, one that was entirely new. A warm flush spread across my cheeks. I felt flattered. My heart gave a little flutter. I turned slightly, clutching my purse like a shield. "Oh, thank you," I stammered, my voice barely audible. He smiled, a friendly, non-threatening smile. "You're welcome. Have a good day." And that was it. He ordered his coffee and left. The interaction lasted less than 10 seconds, but it rocked my world. I, who had spent years feeling clumsy and overweight, who had seen himself as fundamentally undesirable, had just been complimented. A man had found me attractive. The feeling was terrifying, exhilarating, and deeply, deeply confusing. When we sat down with our coffees, Emma was watching me with a knowing look.
"See," she said softly, "it's different, isn't it?"
I could only nod, taking a sip of my latte to hide the tremor in my hands. The warmth of the cup felt grounding. In that small, insignificant moment in a random coffee shop, something inside me shifted. The war between Luke and Scarlett didn't end, but it did call a truce. I was no longer just Luke trapped in a woman's body. I was something new, something that was both and neither. Later that week, looking at myself in the mirror, I tried to find Luke's face in my reflection. I could see hints of him in the curve of my smile, in the intensity of my gaze. He wasn't gone. He was the foundation upon which Scarlett was built. "I'm not Luke anymore," I said aloud, the words feeling true for the first time, but I haven't completely lost him, either. I took a deep breath. I'm both, and for the first time, I think I'm okay with that. A strange sense of peace settled over me. The struggle wasn't over, but it was no longer a battle. It was a journey, and for the first time since waking up in this new body, I was curious to see where it would lead. A year and a half can feel like a lifetime, or it can pass in the blink of an eye. For me, it was both. In the 18 months that followed my transformation, the world outside Emma's apartment continued its chaotic spin. But inside, we had built a new reality. Scarlett was no longer an experiment or a designation. She was simply me. We lived together now, our lives intertwined in every conceivable way. Emma's minimalist apartment had slowly warmed with my presence. My photography equipment now shared space with her servers. My prints of landscapes and cityscapes adorning the previously barren white walls. We were partners, not just in life, but in work, together. We were developing Change 2.0, a version of the technology guided by a strict ethical framework, designed for healing and self-actualization, not control. The ghost of Luke still visited me sometimes. In dreams or in quiet moments of reflection, he was a whisper of nostalgia, a reminder of a life lived in a different skin. I'd feel a phantom ache in my shoulders where they used to be broader, or I'd catch myself reaching for a wallet in a back pocket that was no longer there. But the grief had faded, replaced by a sense of continuity. Emma was right. Luke wasn't gone. He was a part of my story, his insecurities and passions woven into the fabric of who I had become. His eye for beauty was still my eye, now seeing the world from a new, often more vulnerable, perspective. Emma and I had found a rhythm, an easy domestic dance that was both comforting and quietly thrilling. Our relationship had deepened far beyond that of creator and creation. It was a partnership of equals, of two souls who had seen the deepest, most secret parts of each other. There were light, intimate moments, a shared glance over our laptops, her hand finding mine as we watched a movie, a soft kiss in the kitchen as we cooked dinner. Our connection was built on a foundation so strange and profound that conventional labels felt inadequate. She was my friend, my mentor, my anchor, and the woman I was deeply in love with. As our first Valentine's Day as a couple approached, I knew I had to do something that would honor the impossible journey we had taken together. I planned a surprise trip, renting a small secluded cabin in the mountains, nestled deep in a forest of snow-covered pines. When we arrived, the sun was setting, casting a warm, golden glow across the winter landscape. The cabin was exactly as I'd hoped, with a stone fireplace and large windows that looked out onto the silent, sleeping woods. As Emma looked around, her usually guarded expression softened with pure, unadulterated joy. That night, as we sat before a crackling fire, the world outside blanketed in a fresh layer of snow, I felt a nervous energy I hadn't experienced since my first day as Scarlet. My hand kept straying to the small box in my coat pocket. "Emma," I began, my voice trembling slightly. I turned to face her on the thick fur rug, the firelight dancing in her eyes. "Luke gave me my past," I said, the name feeling natural, historical. He was scared and confused, but he was also the one who brought me to you. You gave me a future. You gave me. Tears welled in my eyes, hot and sincere. If I've changed everything about who I am, the only thing I never, ever want to change is the person I love. My hand, now steady, retrieved the box from my pocket. I opened it to reveal a simple, elegant ring, a thin band of white gold with a single, small diamond that glittered like a captured star. "Emma," I whispered, my heart feeling like it was going to beat out of my chest. "Will you marry me?" A beautiful, radiant smile broke across her face, and then she started to laugh. It wasn't a mocking laugh, but one of pure, incredulous delight. "Scarlet," she said, shaking her head as she wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. She reached into the pocket of her own sweater and pulled out an identical velvet box. She opened it. Inside was the exact same ring. "You always were one step ahead of me," she chuckled, her voice thick with emotion. "Even when you were him, I was going to ask you tonight." We stared at each other for a long moment, the two identical rings sparkling between us, a perfect, impossible mirror of our shared soul. Then we were both laughing and crying at the same time, a messy, beautiful collision of joy and relief. She slid her ring onto my finger, and I slid mine onto hers. They were a perfect fit. In the soft glow of the firelight, she leaned in and kissed me. It was a kiss that held all the complexity of our story, the secrets, the fear, the transformation, and the profound, unshakable love that had grown out of it all. As our lips met, the small indicator light on my wrist, a tiny, unobtrusive implant that monitored my connection to Haley, flickered to life, its gentle blue light reflecting in her eyes like a constellation, a silent technological witness to the moment two souls, in every sense of the word, became one.